Well, my name is Brinsley McNamara, and welcome to the Weird Ireland podcast. So I forgot to record an intro for this podcast like I normally do, but it's a conversation between myself and Emmet Byrne. Emmet Byrne is a guy who's been working in the tabletop RPG industry for a long time, and he's making his own tabletop RPG called Beyond the Woods, which is based off of Irish folklore and mythology. For anyone who doesn't know what an RPG is, it's a role-playing game, and a tabletop RPG one is specifically something more like Dungeons and Dragons. It'll be explained a bit more in the podcast. Hope you enjoy. But no, so anyway, it's good to see you, Emmet. Thanks for being part of the Weird Ireland podcast. The reason you're here is, I will say this in the intro when I record it, is because you have a company called Old Oak Games. Yeah. And what you're doing right now is you're making a Irish folklore, legends, mythology based tabletop RPG called Beyond the Woods.
Yes, nailed it in one.
Oh, great! Boom! Yes, print it. So that might confuse some people listening when they hear a tabletop RPG. They might be, if they don't know, if they're not very into that world, they might be immediately envisioning a video game, but that's not what it is. Exactly what is a tabletop RPG, or what is Beyond the Woods that you're making?
Yeah, so a tabletop RPG is the touchstone for everyone is Dungeons and Dragons. You might have seen it in Stranger Things, or some people would be familiar with Critical Role or whatever, but essentially it is a group of people sitting around a table, usually a real table, but people do it online as well, and it's make-believe for grown-ups. It's essentially like you play Lord of the Rings. One person is the game master, so they basically come up with the story, and then the other players pick their characters, like a wizard or a knight or a thief or whatever, and they tell the GM, the game master, what they want to do, and the GM tells them, okay, cool, roll the dice and tell me what you get, and I'll let you know if you succeed. So I was like, okay, there's a goblin in front of you, what do you do? It's like, oh, I want to stab the goblin. Cool, roll your dice. I got 15. You hit the goblin, you stab it, it dies. That kind of thing, like that. Yeah. That at its very basic level, it's kind of shared storytelling, and the rules are in a printed book, and you read the book and you learn the rules, and then you sit around the table and play. But tabletop RPGs are pretty much, anyone who's played a video game has almost certainly encountered them in some form, because Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop RPGs, they led into a lot of video game RPGs like Baldur's Gate, which obviously Baldur's Gate 3 came out a few years ago and was a massive, massive hit. That obviously has its origins in Dungeons and Dragons. It's actually where I first got into tabletop RPGs, because I played Baldur's Gate 1 in 1996, 5, whenever it was. And I was like, oh, hey, what's this thing? And at that time, that was back in the days when you'd actually get the discs and you'd have a manual. Mm-hmm. And the Baldur's Gate game came with a really big manual, but it basically had the rules for Dungeons and Dragons in it.
Right.
And I reverse engineered those rules so that I could play with my friends, play Dungeons and Dragons, because where I'm from, there's no game shop that you can go and buy the book, so I kind of had to retrofit. But yeah, that's off the point slightly. But tabletop RPGs are literally games you play around the table. RPGs is role playing games, so you play a role and you sit around and tell stories. It's it very much ties into the Irish storyteller or oral storytelling that is kind of in our blood and in our history. But it's massive. There's Wizards of the Coast, who make D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, estimate that 50 million people have played D&D over the last 50 years. Mm-hmm. And there's currently 9.5 million active players around the world playing Dungeons and Dragons. And that's just D&D. There's dozens, hundreds of other tabletop RPGs that you could play.
I rarely if ever hear about the other ones, because D&D is such a, I don't know, it's like the Guinness of
it is the dragon in the room. Basically, yeah.
Is that a line that people use when talking about these?
Well, they basically are they're it's the dragon you can't slay because they're so big. They kind of consume everything else. But it's usually kind of a gateway for a lot of people. They play D&D and then they learn about this world of tabletop RPGs, and they go, oh, what's this one? What's this one? What's this one? And there's a lot of other niche stuff. There's plenty of big ones. Call of Cthulhu is another big one, obviously based on H.P. Lovecraft. That's been around for about 50 years as well. That's a really, really big one. And then Pathfinder, which is actually kind of a derivative of Dungeons and Dragons, and there's a good lot out there, but none of them are as big as Dungeons and Dragons, which is owned by Wizards of the Coast, which is in turn owned by Hasbro. So
Wizards of Coast.
Wizards of the Coast.
Of the Coast, right?
Yeah.
I never heard the company name. It doesn't sound terribly fitting for some reason.
Yeah.
I would have thought the company name would have just been Dungeons and Dragons Inc. or something like that.
Well, they were bought out years ago. They were TSR was the company, and then they were bought out by Wizards of the Coast, and then Hasbro owned them now. Who obviously Hasbro own like Pokemon trading card game and Magic the Gathering and everything like that. So yeah,
I thought that was Nintendo, no?
It is, but I could be wrong. Actually, maybe they don't own the Pokemon trading card game, but obviously that's Nintendo. But the actual card game, maybe it's not actually. They're not Hasbro, but Hasbro own Magic the Gathering, which is another massive card game.
They own a Ouija boards, I'm pretty sure too.
Probably.
Or they made the original. They made the original Ouija board.
That's how they got all their power. Yeah, a questionable deal with another worldly entity.
Well, I don't know. Maybe that's why they have D&D as well. It all just comes together like that. When someone's playing a tabletop RPG like D&D or Beyond the Woods, so you said you need a rule book. You need a dice, it sounded like there too, or a die. Is there any other things you need to be able to play it? Yeah,
so usually it's like 3 to 5 people, maybe 3 to 6 people. One of you is the GM, and then the rest of the people play characters. You have the rule books, which can be digital or actual printed books. And then you usually have dice and pen and pencil and paper kind of thing. It's very old school. The dice come in all sort of weird shapes and sizes. Like it confuses people when I sometimes talk to non-gamers, and I'd be like, "Oh, do you have a D6?" And they're like, "What is a D6?"
Is there a D9?
You can get all sorts of weird dice, but generally it's like D4, so a 4-sided dice, which looks like a pyramid. D6, which is your standard dice that you get in Monopoly. D8. D10, D12, D20.
D12.
They're the dice that you would use.
What does a D20 do?
D20 is the one that's mainly used in Dungeons and Dragons.
Really?
Yeah.
Jesus.
So it's kind of the iconic D20. But it'll be, again, you're like, oh, I'm trying to hit the monster. Okay, you need to roll above a 12. Roll your D20 and you add +5 because that's how good you are at fighting.
Yeah.
So you'd be like, well, I got a 10 +5 is 15, so you hit the monster.
And
that's pretty much how all the rules work.
Yeah. So this in a way it's basic, but like, have you been a GM? Is that a tough thing?
Yeah.
Is that a tough thing, or is there a skill to that?
I've always liked it, but it's one of the things people find hardest to get into the hobby is they can't find people to run the game. Everyone wants to play the game, no one wants to run it. Yeah. But I've been pretty much GMing for the last 25 odd years. Yeah. So yeah, I like the power of being you get to make the whole world and make all the decisions, play all the characters instead of just one.
And can anyone ever call you out as a GM that you've just inserted a creature that doesn't exist? Or
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is shared. Well, it depends on the GM. Some GMs are tyrants, but
really?
generally it's like it's shared storytelling. You're making up the story yourselves to have as much fun as possible.
Yeah.
The GM is usually there they're the referee kind of as well with the rules, like to make the call so that the game can keep going. And they was like, okay, well later we'll check the book and figure out who was right about everything. So yeah.
Oh, it's great! It's a world I've never gotten into. Like I was saying before we started recording, that I used to be a lot more into video games. It's the funny thing is I still am. I still watch 6 hour long video essays on games I've never played, never will play because I don't have the thing to play it.
Yeah. But anything like Skyrim, Elder Scrolls, anything like that, it's you pick your race or species. Yeah. You pick your class. That's pretty much D&D. Like you'll be like, I want to be an elf or a dwarf or a human, and I want to be a fighter or a wizard or a thief. That's the heart of that's the origins of D&D, and that you'll find that in a lot of video games.
And even in the older, I'm not in. I was telling you before I started with Oblivion, and that's the one I'm most familiar with. But prior to that, even in Morrowind, it wasn't. When you're hitting something with a sword or with anything, you're not really hitting them in the games previous. It's always a dice roll. It's always a dice. Which, when I first heard of that, because that's not how Oblivion runs, I was like, what? What's it? So sometimes when you're hitting it, you're not actually hitting it. It just always goes to a dice roll. It's not that a dice, you don't see a dice. But that's what's pretty much happening in the game.
Yeah, in the background, that's pretty much what's happening. And when you're playing around a table, the GM is essentially the AI, the computer telling you what happens. But it is, it's a percentage thing for a lot of.
When I heard that, I was like, what? That makes no sense. But
it's wild.
A lot of them were a lot more based in tape. A lot of them were very, very based in it, especially the older ones in the 90s, I guess.
Yeah, but again, even like Baldur's Gate, the original one, you could have a setting so you would see all the rolls. It
Really?
would show you everything that you rolled and what you got and everything like that. So,
Yeah, and character creation screens. A lot of those were dice rolls, I think. Or
some of them it could be, yeah.
Some
It's like,
of them
what's your
dice
strength, and you roll to figure out your strength. And
Yeah.
the old D&D used to be super punishing.
Yeah.
It's much more user friendly these days. Yeah. There's some RPGs that you can play and you can actually die during character creation, which is hilarious.
like tabletop or even video game or video RPGs.
Tabletop.
You can die during, but then sure, does that mean you're out of the game altogether and you
You
can't
have to just start making a character again, because it'll be like you're rolling. You have to figure out your life path. You were born this, and you grew up poor, and then what happened in your teenage years, and you roll on a table to see what happened, and one of them could be you die.
Yeah.
And you just have to start making your character again, basically.
Jesus Christ Almighty! I've seen guys speed running or just doing playthroughs of Daggerfall in particular. It was Daggerfall or some of the games like that, and they're just dice rolling to do their character creation, but you'll see them like speed dice rolling with their like and trying to get something that looks like doable enough to keep going forward in it.
I used to do the same.
It gets so, to be honest, I always find them so enjoyable to learn and understand about, because they're so complicated and not even the game. Now the game mechanics is one thing, and then when you get into lore of, I was saying, I'm not sure if I said it while we were recording, but Shameen, who's not here today, he wanted to be here today, but he's got other stuff on. He's big into WoW, and he can tell you all about all the lore, and it gets really farcical and complicated and convoluted very quickly. But he just knows it all. It's so funny.
Yeah,
to
it's
talk
massive.
about
You know, I worked on the Lord of the Rings RPG a few years ago, and there are some super fans out there, and if you get something wrong, you hear about it.
Yeah, well, they're like scholars for the Tolkien, for the Tolkien stuff,
wild,
literally,
absolutely wild. But,
so you said you worked in Lord of the Rings tabletop a while ago, because you used to work for companies making tabletop.
Yeah. I've been working in the tabletop industry for about 6 years. So the company I previously worked for, I worked on some of the Lord of the Rings RPGs, Doctor Who, which was a lot of fun.
Oh, cool.
And then pretty much all the Warhammer games as well. So anyone who's familiar with Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40k, and then Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So
Jamie used to collect. He used to collect 40k. Yeah, I've got a lot of friends that are really into 40k.
Yeah. No, there's some big 40k fans out there. I have a lot of minis and paints at home, but the only reason I have the minis is because we used to get them for free. So
those things cost a bomb.
Yeah.
I remember he used to go to used to be a place in Dublin. Well, I'm sure it's still there, Games Workshop. But then there was cheaper ones as well. But it costs a fortune to collect an army.
Yeah. You buy one little figure and it costs you €15, and you have to assemble it and paint it yourself.
Yeah. And then maybe you'll use them for a game. I've rarely known guys to do that. Hang on a second here. We're actually recording this interview in the, what do you call it? The Midlands
Innovation Centre, I think it's
Midlands
called?
Innovation and Research Centre, because it looks like he's out to fix something. And we just took sort of like a lecture room or a conference room to record this, because why not?
Random office.
But no, so you're making Warhammer 40k, Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who, tabletop RPGs. Is this an Irish company you're doing it for?
They were a UK-based company who moved over to Ireland during just before Brexit.
Right.
So I left them about a year ago and founded Old Oak Games, so my own company, because I wanted to make my own stuff. Essentially, working on the licensed games was fun, but you are playing with other people's toys, essentially. Like, there's stuff you can't do. So I wanted to kind of strike out on my own and make my own games, because I always have tons of ideas for both worlds and games and everything like that. So that's kind of where Beyond the Woods came from. So it uses the Dungeons and Dragons rules, which means anyone who plays D&D can use our book. But it's a kind of a sort of a dark fantasy world inspired by Irish myths and legends. So it's not Ireland. It has its own map.
Tir
Nascath, which comes from Tir Nascaha, the Lands of Shadow. So I had to brush up on my Irish for it as well. But yeah, so it's an Irish-inspired world, so kind of drawing on a lot of the myths and legends and using some of the language and everything like that, but also tweaking it and keeping it fantasy, because you don't want to be historically accurate, because that can get a little bit boring. But so there's ghosts and monsters and all that kind of stuff. But yourself, there's plenty to draw on all those weird traditions and spirits and everything like that.
Absolutely. We'll go into because I want to know, because I don't know myself the most about the. The game's not out yet.
No. We're going to be going to crowdfunding first, so we're launching on Kickstarter on the 11th of March. So when we're recording that's like 3.5 weeks.
Yeah.
Not that I'm counting down the days. But the book will be printed and in stores probably in about a year. So it does take a while to get finished off. Yeah. So we have a chunk of it done already. You can play it now. There's a quick start available for free. But the rest of the book, it's actually 2 books and a lot more art. So that'll take about a year to make after we do the Kickstarter.
Groovy, right? And I mean, because I was actually before we met for this interview, I was like, "Do you got a prototype? Do you got a product I can look at, or something like that?" We don't quite have anything right now, but we do have. What resources do you have here?
We have a couple of sheets of paper.
Yes.
So I have what's called the Quick Start Guide. So it's about 45 pages. It is the full rules, pretty much, that are going to be in the game, and an adventure to learn the rules. So it's filled with lovely art and everything like that. And then I have a section of the map for the Quilchmar, which is the Dead Woods. Which we'll hopefully get some pictures of, and I can send you the high-res files of them.
I might use if there's any particular high-res file I can use for the the cover of a podcast and stuff for there, and ideally if I'm posting to if you got any kind of artwork I can use.
I'll send you the press pack.
Press pack. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
It's not my first rodeo, but yeah, I'll send you the map as well. But yeah, the map is massive. I wanted it to still feel like Ireland, so the actual size of the map, dimensions, top to bottom, left to right, are Ireland roughly in kilometers. But yeah, we've tons of good art, lots of super talented artists that I've worked with in the past, again, who've worked on Warhammer and Lord of the Rings, and some people have worked on Star Wars and The Witcher and everything like that. So yeah. I kind of assembled my artist Avengers, as I like to say, and I got the beautiful stuff. And then we have a couple of the. You have your standard D&D classes are not in this, which would be elf, dwarf, halfling. So we have the puka.
How many classes? So is it 4? Wait, I think I have right here. 4 lineages.
Lineages,
that's
yes.
it, yeah. Rather than, do you say classes in D&D or?
So the lineage is kind of like your race or your species, and then class is still a class. So we have the lineages are the Dini, which is just people, and then puka, and the Aesshi, so the fairy folk. And the changelings, which pretty much look like people, but they are, they're fairies that were swapped at birth. And then we have the Ballerins, which are for based on Balor of the Evil Eye. So he was kind of the greatest
Fomorians?
of the Fomorians. Yeah. So he's they're kind of have the blood of Balor in them. So they're kind of like almost have this kind of goat heads and things like that. And they have the evil eye, but it's in their neck, and so they have like an eyelid that opens in their neck. It's very gross, but yeah.
And you have 6 new classes. Is that in addition to D&D classes?
Yeah. So the classes are built because the game plays differently to your standard D&D, because it's more focused on exploration and survival, whereas standard D&D is more about fighting monsters and kicking down doors and stuff. So this one is more about exploration and survival. So the classes are kind of tweaked for that. So we have warrior, which is a D&D fighter, so they're not massively different. And a hunter and channeler, and unfortunately,
I'm going to sound clever. I just have notes and open in front of me here. Warrior, storyteller, Dree.
Storyteller,
Did you say Dree?
The Dree, which is so there is a druid in D&D, but the Dree is more based on like the Irish idea of the druid, like the which is effectively a wizard.
Yeah.
And then the storyteller is one I was really kind of excited about doing, because it's kind of based on the Irish Shanachie, like it's this tradition of oral storytelling, and they can weave stories together to essentially inspire their allies and friends.
I thought I was just going to weave stories just to burn the ears off opponents.
Yeah. So it's but yeah, no. So that's been really fun to deal with the. So there's a lot of inspiration again in the world. Like, it was a world of oral storytelling, and then there was this great cataclysm. So a lot of the world's history has been forgotten. So you have to go out and kind of rediscover and everything like that. A bit like our own. So much of our history was
true,
was wiped out.
So
a lot of it was left down to oral storytelling and tradition. But yeah, so that's the kind of
that's a
inspiration.
nutshell with Beyond the Woods / the Tir Nascot. Tir Nascot's the land it takes place in. So what's the will we get a brief synopsis of the story of the game, and then go into what was your inspiration behind making an Irish folklore mythology based tabletop RPG in general?
Yeah. So the thing with tabletop RPGs is generally it's not a narrative in a traditional sense. What you do is you give people a world to then go play in, effectively. So where the game starts, or when you'll start your party, effectively there was this great in world it's called Boss and Sale, so the death of life, where the Slua, for anyone knows, who like the Slua na Marv, the host of the dead, they swept across the land and they effectively killed hundreds of thousands and pulled out their soul, which then makes the bigger army. So if anyone's ever played The Witcher, it's a bit like the Wild Hunt. They kind of swept across the land and people fled to the last great city called Caed Darach, which is the first oak. And the light of this golden oak tree protects them from the Slua. So that's pretty much where you've been living for the last couple of centuries, or your ancestors have been living. But the golden oak is now dying, and the light is not going to protect you anymore. So you need to venture out into the world and discover the history, discover what happened, find some way to either heal the tree or somewhere else that's safe to live. So you're kind of going into this unknown world that you've been locked out of for centuries, and rediscovering all these ancient ruins and things like that, while also trying to contend with the Slua and all other manner of spirits and monsters and fey creatures.
Yeah. And what kind of on that note, can you encounter banshees? Can you encounter?
Yeah. It's an interesting one because standard Dungeons and Dragons has already taken a lot of Irish creatures. There's a banshee in D&D, and then there's the Fomorians as well.
Really, in D&D?
Yeah, they're in Warhammer as well. They're like So there's a good few, like, you see the Irish stuff in there. But we'll be doing them differently. And then there's you'll meet a banshee, but also stuff like the Avertok, which is the Irish vampire. Yeah. And there's the Slua as well, and then the from your own book, the Olifesh or Fesh, the Irish dragon, effectively, or
sea serpent.
So that kind of thing. There's so much to draw on. I actually have a good few kids' books.
Oh, really?
On Irish monsters.
Oh,
and
they've got great illustrations
amazing.
And the info you want straight up.
Just stuff you haven't heard of. And the Dover Coo, which is like the king of the otters.
It's the otter thing. That's a myth from. I've not done a video on that yet because it comes from places on the far side of County Leitrim.
Yeah,
I was actually there just the other day, but I didn't have time. But how does that one go again? There's a grave.
Fully remember.
There's a grave on the far side of, like, on the western side of County Leitrim.
Yeah.
And there's when it has like a symbol that looks like an otter on it.
Yeah.
It's some kind of an otter monster, and somebody came out of a lake and killed a woman. It's something. It's
always
story
mad
like that.
stuff. People transforming into this, that, and the other. Yeah, but I've always liked otters because I don't know if it was one of the Jim Henson shows years ago, but there was a character in it called Emmet Otter, and it was like one of the only Emmets in media.
Oh, really?
Until like Back to the Future and then the Lego Movie, and I was like, okay.
What gave you the inspiration behind making Beyond the Woods? Pardon me.
There's a couple of things to it. So when I was in school, I always liked the Irish myths, but we never really did much on them. I was actually quite poor at Irish myself. I wasn't actually great at Irish myself, so my actual Irish language is not great. Thankfully, my partner is a teacher, so she's been helping me with a lot of that.
Good stuff.
And I'm trying to relearn, reconnect with that a bit. But a big part of it for me was there are some, say, Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop RPGs out there, and they'll be inspired by Celtic myths and legends, or British and Celtic myths and legends, and Irish always just kind of gets lumped into that. There was no dedicated, this is inspired by Irish myth and legend and written by an Irish person. There's a book that came out last year, and it's like British and Celtic Isles folklore or whatever, but it's written by a British guy.
Wow.
But no disrespect, but like the Irish bits should be written by the Irish people, kind of thing. And so for me, it was a big part. It was honing in on like a more honest, or I suppose genuine showing of Irish myths and legends, and have it created by like an Irish person. That was the kind of big thing for me. And then again, it was the actual game itself is the type of game I've wanted to play in a while. So the world and the game kind of came together. So it was the game mechanics I had come up with these ideas for. I was like, okay, well, what does the world look like? It's like, well, take inspiration from our own history and our own myths and legends, because there's so many of them, and by their nature, because of myths being lost or the oral storytelling, there's no real true myth and legend, because they've all changed, and you get different versions of them depending on who you talk to and everything like that. Like even when I was looking up stuff like Balor, the Balor of the Evil Eye, there's so many conflicting things. Like, oh well, he had 2 eyes, but one of them was evil and could shoot fire. And I was like, no, he was more like a cyclops. He had 1 eye, and then another one was like, no, he actually had 3 eyes, and he had 1 in his forehead, stuff like that. So like, there's no real consistency to it because everything was oral storytelling. You know, so that's one of the things that really drew me to it. And it's that mystery and the unknown, and that it's a bit more permeable. It can kind of move around, and you can kind of make the world what you want it yourself. Because in the game, as you discover places, everyone's aren't going to be in the same place, because part of the game is you have a big map and you have a lot of stickers. So it's like, oh, we've discovered this ancient ruin. Where is it? Okay, we just stick it on the map somewhere, and you decide where it goes. So everyone's map will be a bit different.
Oh, each player will have an individual map of their own?
Yeah, so well, not each player, so each group. There'll be like the macro group that we've done, which is like, here's the mountains, here's the trees, here's the rivers, here's the lakes. But as you're playing, like, okay, well, we've discovered this ruin, and where is it? Okay, we'll put it here on the map, and the GM will put a sticker down and say it's here. So if one group goes to another group, like, oh, we put that ruin over here on the west coast, kind of thing. So it lets, and you can also mark, like, stick stickers down. It's like, oh, our character died here. We'll just remember. We'll stick a little headstone on the map here. But yeah, so it's kind of that. The kind of otherworldly nature as well, where it always feels it's a bit dreamlike, you know, when you're dealing with the
moves and it changes, and there's no, I don't know what way to put it, but there's a lot of sort of otherworldly stories where you can be in the normal world, and then like in some folk tales, and the next thing you get into a sort of otherworldly one, and locations stop making sense. Like,
exactly. Yeah,
I'm going to take a wild stab and guess that there's Will-o'-the-Wisps in standard D&D.
Yes,
yeah,
there are,
of course. Is there Will-o'-the-Wisps in this?
There likely will be. So we have a little thing in the book that says, hey, there's already some Irish monsters in D&D. You can just use these ones, like the black hounds or black dogs, or, you know, there's stuff like that in D&D, and it's such a bit of a collection. D&D pretty much scoured any kind of mythology from any country and took what they wanted from it. So there's some Irish stuff in there, and again, like Tolkien as well. It was interesting when I was working with the artist to do the Aos She. But they're effectively elves. You know, and like Tolkien kind of took some of his inspiration from the Aos She when he was writing the elves. So it's now gone the other way back, where it's like, oh yeah, our Aos She look like elves because that was the inspiration for them. So it's an interesting one to tackle, because there's so many fantasy tropes that come from Irish myth and legend, like stuff like the Banshee and the Avertak, the vampire, and things like that.
And the Dover Coo.
Or the Doulahan, the headless horseman. That's originally Irish as well, and obviously Samhain and Halloween. And
are players able to encounter figure, because it's Tir Nascath is not Ireland literally, but it's a.
There's lots of myths and legends, and there is an other world where there's spirits and fairy creatures and stuff like that. And stuff comes over from there that might be malicious or might be.
Can you encounter Saint Patrick or an equivalent? Can you encounter Finn McCool or Cú Chulainn or equivalents?
I'd probably stay away from. We would be staying away from directly referencing those more than likely, but there might be like place names, you know, and like Bridget, as more the goddess Bridget or the goddess Brige, she's in it. So there's the storyteller that I was talking about earlier. They have like the legend of Brige, as a healer and a poet and things like that. And then there'll be like maybe the legend of Lou, you know, Lou's spear and things like that. So that's where they might appear as part, even like their mythology within this world of mythology, you know, so you won't be meeting Cú Chulainn or anything like that.
No, I kind of I'm going to joke, but I was going to joke that there must be like an ironclad copyright on Cú Chulainn and Finn McCool. You can't use that intellectual property.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true, but
no, absolutely not. Yeah. I'm like, well, I guess we probably should have leprechauns in there as well, but you have the Cluricon as well, which is
you can
like
use the words for the leprechaun.
I
think it would slightly take. Well, I mean, you've had a long time to analyze this. I would think the leprechaun would slightly take the player out of it, because the next thing they're expecting to run into like the Tato Man. Or something like that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was speaking to I was speaking to someone else. They were based in the UK, and they were asking, you know, would Irish people have an advantage playing this game?
Oh, there's a question.
And I was like, well, yeah, because I ran it with my own group, and there's a part in it where you come to this open glade, and it's beautiful and it's sunny and everything like that. And in the middle of it, there's a hawthorn tree surrounded by mushrooms. And all of my group were like, we don't go near it because it's obviously a fairy tree. You know, so they're like, no, we stay the hell away from it. But like, if you're playing that with people from the UK or America, they're like, oh, this is cool, let's go check it out. You know, so we all have our weird little things that we just won't mess with. No matter how we say we're not superstitious, but you know, we're a little stitious.
I agree. There's I wouldn't be superstitious like that, but there's 4 County Westmeath by any chance?
No.
It's a village in North County Westmeath, and there is a monastery there, a very large ruins of a monastery there, a medieval one, and there's what we call the Seven Wonders of Four. They even mark it as the Seven Wonders of Four, and it's all these things like there's this stream that the water goes uphill, there's this tree that that can't burn, there's this water that you can't boil it, there's stuff like that. And I don't believe any of that. You know, I have no. I believe if I take the water that won't boil and attempt to boil it, it will boil. I have no doubt about that. And I also don't feel like any ill will come upon me if I do that. But I was there with a buddy of mine from America back in August. And she was like, "Oh, we try. Will we take some and try?" And I was like, "No,
just in case."
I don't think anything bad will happen, and I believe it will boil. But it's just kind of like I've known about those since I was little. It's kind of a slight reverence behind it that I just wouldn't even try to boil it. You know? So we are all at least a little bit like that.
But that's the stuff that I kind of wanted to bring in to the game as well, because like a lot of people know the story of Cuchulainn and things like that, but it's those kind of more colloquial, lesser known like little myths and things like that, because we used to because I grew up near the Curragh, near Donnelly's Hollow,
Kilcullen.
the footsteps where you would have seen, and we would kind of play out there. We had football training out there, and then there was Donnelly's Hollow, and we'd go and play there or whatever, but there would always be pine cones. And we were always told, don't bring a pine cone home because it's a banshee's comb.
Oh, cool.
And she'll like follow you home. Now, it's clearly our parents didn't want us bringing home a load of pine cones, basically. But that always stuck with me, as like the idea that the pine cone is a banshee's comb and she'll come after you if you take it off the Curragh. So that always terrified me. I was like, I'm not going to bring a pine cone home just in case. Like.
So let's put it this way, because with these tabletop RPGs like Beyond the Woods, there is a rule book and there is lore behind it. But you can move around within that. Let's say we're playing it. Let's say you're the GM. Let's say are you able to introduce a scenario where the party comes upon some pine cones?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then the players, let's say a player that knows or is under the belief that that's a banshee's comb and ought not take one, will not take one, but one that does not do that might do it, and then it's a bad encounter for them. You can throw in and work with all this stuff, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so we'll also have books with kind of sample adventures in it, or adventures you can play through, which will be kind of a scenarios like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And you get an outline for what the adventure is, but you can't account for what players will do in it. Do you know? So to give an example, when I was writing the adventure that's in the quick start, there's a part where you meet a white stag, like the Irish elk, the giant elk, and it's clearly magical, and it just it looks at you, and if you leave it alone, it's fine, nothing happens. If you shoot it, it immediately dies and screams, and then you're cursed for the rest of the game, and bad things just keep happening to you. So like I wrote that into the adventure, but a GM could do the exact same thing. They could pick up bits of lore from anywhere and put it in. We'll give them tons of stuff to play with and ideas and everything like that, but if they want to bring their own stuff to it, that's kind of the joy of tabletop RPGs. You can just invent whatever you want.
I honestly must play.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know that many people. I do have some friends that do it, but
well, now you know one more.
Now I know another one. Yeah, I've got high level GM.
Yeah.
But what was I thinking there? What particular folklore or like is there any specific characters that are directly reflected by like a Queen Maeve or the Cattle Raid of Cooley? Like, is there direct references like that? Is there any specific ones that you incorporate in?
There's some in there. Like when you get there's like characters that I've named after iconic people from Irish myth and legend, and Breege is mentioned in there, and Peg, the famous storyteller, and then our warrior in the book, her name is Maeve. So like things like that we've brought in, and then there's a lot of myths and legends incorporated kind of in and around it that again they're not directly taken from the Irish myths, but you would recognize them, or you might recognize hints of like, oh, this is this other story, it's tied to Ireland and everything like that.
Do you got a favorite kind of myth, folklore, legend like that?
The one I read recently, I brought the book with me. I picked it when I was down in Galway.
Can I see it?
Yeah. Amazing bookshop in Galway. What's it called? I give them a shout out because I actually have the bookmark here. What's it called? Charlie Byrne's bookshop.
All right.
Absolutely amazing bookshop. But I picked up. There's 2 books by Lady Augusta Gregory.
I have this at home.
Yeah. But she basically gathered up all of those oral stories and put them in print, and she was one of the first people to do it. So I have that, and I have another one as well.
She has two. This one is Gods and Fighting Men.
Yeah,
but she has another one, and I have that too, and I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I can't remember. They've kind of and then I think their names have changed in the reprint as well. But the other one is much more about like I think it's the Ulster cycle and stuff like that, and it is more about like Cullen and things like that. Whereas this is almost like a scattering of myths and legends from around Ireland.
It's kind of the bigger name. This one, Gods and Fighting Men, is the one you hear.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the
it's really good. But the one thing I like, one of my favorites in that, and it's such a silly one, is the Cave of Cruachan. It's like a 2-page story in it, but it's just I don't know. For me, it kind of has that Irish weirdness to it, where it's the idea is that one of the warriors in it. God, I can't remember who it is. Is it Cullen? He goes to some farmer and he's like, "What's troubling you?" And he says, "Every year on Samhain, this woman comes out. One of the Ainshi comes and she takes 9 of our best cattle." And he's like, okay. And he goes and deals with that. And he comes back and he's like, is there anything else troubling you? And it's like, yeah, in that cave over there. So it's like, in one cave, this woman keeps coming out of this cave and taking our cattle. And then he comes back. He's like, and that cave over there, 3 she-wolves keep coming out and taking our sheep. So it's just like, it's such a silly story. It's not really silly. It's not written silly, but it's just the idea that it's just, there's these caves where people keep coming out and stealing cattle and sheep and chickens and everything like that. It's like, it's just such a funny one to me. But yeah, all the, the traditional ones, like the Cuchulainn was always a great one. And the
classics.
The Brian Boru and stuff like that, because there's the sculpture down in Newbridge on the Kerr racecourse. Is it Brian Boru?
Is it Boru? Because he's associated with Clare,
and it's the 2 dogs. Sorry,
that's I presume that's Cuchulainn.
I can't remember. That's not terrible.
I
literally, I drive past it every single day.
And I mean, look, at least I've never been to Newbridge. I have an excuse.
Yeah, I drive past it every day. God Almighty.
One thing I wanted to mention that's a little bit off topic is I remember going through your TikTok a while ago, and in university you did your thesis on Silent Hill 2. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
Can you tell me
on TikTok? Jesus.
Yeah, you put it up there. It stuck out in my head. Can you tell me what's your thesis related to the PS2 game Silent Hill 2? Well, maybe it's on other consoles.
I have to remember. I wonder if it's still in the college somewhere. But Silent Hill 2, the original, I absolutely I love horror games. I absolutely love horror games. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, everything like that. But Silent Hill 2, like properly, I think traumatized me. When people would ask me what I was scared of, I would say Velociraptors because of Jurassic Park and like sirens. My granddad used to live in the Curragh, and every now and again the air raid siren would go off in the Curragh camp, and honest to God, it terrified me. Fog kind of scares me as well because Silent Hill 2. But it was more so, it was about James Sunderland in the game and his like mental state and like the sexualization of the nurses in Silent Hill 2 versus Silent Hill 1 and then Silent Hill 3, because that's like his repressed libido and because his wife was sick and all this kind of stuff. For anyone who hasn't played Silent Hill 2, this is going to sound crazy. And then how people missed the point on that later on, and when they did the movie they just put in sexy nurses because it looks good on a poster, where it's actually that's tied specifically to the character, and it's there's a lot of like phallic imagery and stuff like that in there. So I was kind of just analysing all that stuff. So so
it was a psychological analysis of
I
thought, because I'm not sure if it actually said in the video in your TikTok what the thesis was about. I thought you might be analysing some kind of game mechanic.
No, it was actually
or the soundtrack.
It was actually a story. I can't remember exactly what it was. I must try and dig it out, but that's like 15, 20 years ago. Who knows? I'd rather not think about it. But yeah, no, it's I love Silent Hill 2.
Did it get good marks?
I think so.
Yeah.
The lecturer wasn't a gamer, so he was like, yeah, sounds right. He's not going to go and play the game.
I'm big into horror games as well, big into Project Zero. Some people call that Fatal Frame in the USA. It's called Fatal Frame in the USA, the Japanese game.
Clock Tower.
I never played Clock Tower. That's
I played Clock Tower 3 years ago. Terrifying.
Terrifying. There are terrific ones in PS2. That's kind of my era because I think the graphics kind of peaked there for me. Do you know what I mean? And they're iconic for voice acting. Got a lot better in video games from the next generation onwards. But there's such a brilliant charm to
the Resident Evil 2. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
The lines, but not even the script, but the delivery is awful. And then sometimes if it's a Japanese game in English, the translations are awful, and that doesn't happen anymore. That was just because they didn't care as much, or wasn't as much focus or money put into it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the Alan Wake 2 actually is probably my game of last year. Brilliant. Not massively scary, but just very good, like kind of thriller, psychological horror kind of thing.
That came out, was that PS3 originally, the first one came out on? Or?
Alan Wake 1, I think, maybe. Yeah. I can't remember.
I haven't played. The only games, I try not to, the only games I play these days is, I have it on my laptop, not Age of Empires, pardon me, Medieval 2 Total War.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, unbelievable. Absolute classic. It's a bit of effort me downloading it every time. I've not bought it on the App Store, so every time. So if I have some time off, I'll play it and then I'll delete it for like 6 months or a year or something like that because I have other things to do and it'll just keep me up all night.
I've been toying with reinstalling it, but no. Rome 2 was, I spent so long playing Rome. Or Rome, was it Rome 1?
Rome 1 probably. Rome 2 I never heard anyone talk too kindly about.
Rome 2 was okay. Rome 1 I played to death.
Same here, yeah. Medieval 2 I go for now just because it's just newer, it's just faster, it's just bigger map, it's a bit better in ways, you know. But anyways, back to I just like talking about games in general, even ones I barely play anymore.
This is a video game podcast now.
This is a video game podcast now. On that note, do you have any favorite video games? Top 3 even. I do.
Let me see.
I can tell you my 3 just to give you time to think even. Number 1, Metal Gear Solid 3, specifically the Subsistence Edition, not Snake Eater, the original, because you can change the camera angle mid-game and it's a game changer, you know, if you do that. Number 2, I'm going to give to... God, I had it in my head just a moment ago. Just totally flew out of my head. Devil May Cry 3.
What a game.
What a game. I'm going to say the special edition. I've never played the original edition, but I've heard it's a lot harder. That's just the edition I had of it.
So long I haven't played it.
Tip-top game. You can see what generation I was playing games. Number 3, I'm going to have to give to The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, just because it's just too much in there. It was the first time I played a proper open world sandbox RPG like that. And very easy to get into. And it's only gotten better in the fan base since because it is so clumsy and awkward and you know you talk to someone, their face comes right up against you and everyone looks kind of ridiculous in it. It's not gritty and realistic whatsoever. But you know what? Make fantasy again. Make fantasy blocky look goofy, blocky, colourful. Now they're all gritty and dark and realism. You know, it was pretty funny when they were goofy looking like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It needs a bit more. That was one of the things as well when I was doing Beyond the Woods. Is like I wanted there to be colour in it. I'm sick of grimdark.
There's so much grimdark ones,
especially working on 40k and Warhammer Fantasy. It's all grimdark.
I mean, it's cool, but
you get kind of burnt out on it after a while. Yeah, mine would probably be Silent Hill 2, Final Fantasy 7, and probably The Last of Us, I would say.
Really?
Maybe. Last of Us, it'd be tossed between Last of Us and Baldur's Gate 2, I would say. Yeah.
Between Last of Us and Baldur's Gate 2?
I know it's a weird one.
It is a weird one.
Yeah.
But
I should probably swap out Final Fantasy 7 for Baldur's Gate if I want to keep the genres split.
But you're going to like Baldur's Gate 2 and Last of Us for very, 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 very different reasons.
Yeah, it's the story of The Last of Us, not the actual game mechanics in Last of Us. They're okay. They're fine. They're serviceable. But the story was... that was kind of what got me on that one. I do enjoy my narrative games.
Yeah, I've got to make a confession regarding the Silent Hill series on my part. So I bought Silent Hill 1 and PS1 back maybe 2007 or something like that. I got it online. I was playing through that very, very slowly because I wasn't used to those PS1 games that are unbelievable. They're tank controls. But also they're so long, like they are so long and they're quite tedious. And I thought it was scary at the time as well. But then... about 2 years later, for some reason in the PS3 era, they started selling loads of what looked like new editions of older PS2 games. Yeah. So I managed to get number 2, 3, and 4, all pretty much in the space of a week. And I thought, well, I'm not going to play them until I have the 4 of them in order. Yeah. Maybe we'll play through them in order. And as a result of that, I've never finished Silent Hill 1 because it was so long and tedious and I just forgot what I was doing. And as a result of that, I've never played the other 3. And in fact, number 4... which works, I hope. I've never taken it out the box, and that was like in 2009 or something that I did that. So I have them all. Except for the first one, I've never really played the other ones, but I still have them all. PS2 still works. There's no reason not to.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to break your heart or not, but like the second one is completely unrelated to the first one. You can play the second one without having played the first one. They're completely different stories.
I get slightly the impression that's the case with all 4 of them in a way.
But 3 is pretty much a direct sequel to 1.
Okay.
4 is weird and kind of
weird.
The remake of 2 is supposed to be very good, so that's on my to buy list.
Yeah,
soon, maybe after the Kickstarter is done.
I tell you what, I listened to the Akira Yamaoka soundtrack of number 2 a lot. When I was writing my book, I was listening to that a lot.
Yeah, he's a talented dude.
Yeah, he is. He's something else. Yeah. I wanted to go back to Beyond the Woods actually. Just there, I was trying to think where the thread was. I could just go off into these video gaming threads very easily.
Yeah.
Well, what's it like being an entrepreneur actually in Ireland? And is it your first time starting your own business like this?
Yeah, it is. I've been part of a couple of startups or smaller companies that were effectively startups. But kind of I left my previous role in June last year, so I started the company in July. And Ireland, from what I've learned from my own experiences from talking to people, Ireland is great for helping people with startups. Like we were talking about, the reason we're in the Innovation Centre is I'm doing the New Frontiers programme. So that's done through Enterprise Ireland, and it's to help companies kind of, there's a couple of phases to it. So phase 1 is like a part-time evening one that you can do. Phase 2 is a full-time 6-month course, which is what I'm doing at the moment. You can skip phase 1 and go to phase 2, which I was lucky enough to do. And then there's phase 3 as well, which is another few months of help. So you get a lot of mentorship, you get like financial aid, so you can actually, if you need to, you can quit your job and actually focus on it full time. But then you just get access to a massive amount of people and resources that can help you. Like, it's like, okay, here's how you do a 5-year profit and loss account. Here's what you need to know. Like today, here's what you need to know about GDPR. Here's what here's how you do marketing. Here, that kind of stuff. Really, really good, like foundational stuff. Because for me, I've worked in tabletop industry for the last 6 years. I know tabletop RPGs inside and out, but I've never run a company. So it's just me at the moment, but the plan is to hire staff, and we'll be shipping books, and we'll have to deal with taxes and all that kind of stuff. So being able to get access to those people that would cost you a lot of money if you were to pay them as a consultant has been huge. It's been a huge help. So and just having it's kind of lonely starting it by yourself as well, because I went from obviously working in a company to working by myself. And as I mentioned, my partner, she's a teacher. So when I quit, her and the kids were off for the summer holidays, so they were around, and then they went back to school in September, and then I was just in the house by myself, like, oh my god, what am I doing? And then I started this course in November, so then you kind of get to go and you get to talk to people, and everyone has ups and downs, so it's kind of like, oh geez, this week's been really hard, things have gone wrong. And then you'll have other people who are on like a high, so they can help you, and it's just a chance to actually talk to your peers, and realize, oh, we're all kind of going through the same stuff. And I'm sure
it's a network even after the whole thing's done.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, it's and tabletop RPGs are a very small industry over here as well.
Is there? Do you have competitors within Ireland or?
Well, there's two. So there's Cubicle 7 are based over here, and then Pelgrane Press are based over here as well. They are both originally English companies, I think, that moved over here. So, but yeah, as an actual Irish company, I think I'm one of the only ones.
Right.
Like Irish founded and Irish owned.
Yeah.
There was one in Northern Ireland, Penny Dragon Games. I'm not sure if they're still going. I think there's a good few like smaller creators and things, but I don't know if there's anyone like doing it full time, quit their job to start a company. No one's stupid enough to do it, I guess.
But even the ones based in Ireland, I guess they're not necessarily competitors, because your niche is the mythology and folklore based story of the woods. Yeah. And like you said, there's nobody else directly doing that, or not other ones made indirectly?
No, not really. Like there's I saw something pop up the other day, and it was something to do with the Hill of Tara or the Legend of Tara or something like that. It popped up in my Facebook feed that was going on sale on one of these websites, and it was a tabletop RPG, but it was made by some guy in America.
Yeah,
and it's just like, seeing that is very hard. You're like, oh, come on, man. It's like, I know you don't have any culture, but
is there any guys that have no company but are able to make whole tabletop RPGs like in their bedroom, and
loads,
like full detail, everything there?
Well, so I'm part of a Discord group, the Tabletop Industry Network UK, and that's like there's a big scale of people in there. Like there's solo creators that are making like 64, 32 page zines in A5 format, and there's people who work for big tabletop RPG companies in the UK that are selling thousands or tens of thousands of books and everything like that. And so you have the kind of running the gamut there. For me, it's pretty much, there's me, and I do all the planning on the book, and then I hire some very, very talented people to do the art.
Yeah.
I'll do some of the writing, and then I'll hire some other very talented people to do the other bits of the writing.
Yeah.
And then I do a lot of layout, graphic design myself, but ideally I will be hiring other people to do that and everything like that. So it is possible to do a massive chunk of it yourself, and then you're relying on the marketing. So I'm doing some of the marketing myself, but then I've paid a marketing agency now to do more of it. So yeah, there's only so much you can do as a sole creator, but there still is plenty you can do. And one of the things, I did video games in school. I went to college for video games.
Oh, really?
And part of the reason I didn't pursue that is you become a tiny cog in a massive machine. So you don't really have ownership over much. It's like, well, you're in charge. And then I went into animation. It kind of ends up being the same. It's like, you're in charge of lighting.
Yeah.
Like you position the lights in the scene. You're like, okay, I guess that's fun. But like, you know, with tabletop RPG, it's like, okay, well, I brief all the art. I write the story. I outline it. You know, like I can comfortably say a massive chunk of it is mine, and I work directly on it. Like I can point to books that are on my shelf, and I'm like, I wrote half of that book at least, and I commissioned all the art, and then some brilliant talented people did the art and the editing and all that kind of stuff. But there's much more hands-on, and you can actually get to really create something yourself, really, and work with some really talented people, you know, and that collaboration is a lot of fun on that as well.
And the game mechanics, the ones unique to this game, do you come up with all that yourself? Or
yeah, I've been doing that for years. It's kind of it's my thing. Like this, it uses the Dungeons and Dragons rules, but it builds on them and adds some new ones to make it play in a different way. But previously, I was saying Warhammer Age of Sigmar, I wrote and designed that entire game.
Wow.
Like there's the miniatures game, which is Games Workshop, but we did the RPG for it. I designed the whole system and figured out all the mechanics and how it all works. And it's very, very different to D&D, but I designed all of that. You know, and I wrote half of that book. Any of the mechanical bits of that book I wrote, and then other people wrote the kind of lore and everything like that. So,
who's the audience? Well, not the audience. Yeah, no, who's the market, do you think, for this game? And what I mean is, naturally, tabletop players, but naturally we're in Ireland, and this is a Irish, kind of base game. But is it also a market in the USA, in Europe, in the UK? Do you think it'll sell well in the USA?
Yeah, that's kind of a part of it as well. The Irishness of it should do well in America. Because we have a lot of that, the history, and it feels very old, and like the fairy folk and everything. The Irish people do well in America anyway. Well, from the tabletop RPG industry side, like 60 to 70% of your sales are going to be coming through the US anyway.
Right,
and then you're like 15% UK, 15% EU, and then the rest is kind of rest of the world, but that is growing as well. There's a bigger market in Asia and stuff now, and D&D doesn't have as much of a stranglehold, which is really, really interesting.
Oh, so it's
Call of Cthulhu was much bigger in Asia, I think, particularly in Japan, because D&D wasn't translated into Japanese. So Call of Cthulhu got there first, kind of thing. So it has much more of a stranglehold in there. And then it was same in Europe. Like I know, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure in Poland there was The Witcher RPG, and that was released before Dungeons and Dragons was translated into Polish. So that was more popular there. And there's a German one that I can't think of the name of now, which was hugely popular in Germany. Now that's changed now because everything's translated into every language now. But yeah, so it's different depending on where you go in the world. But I think the market for this is massively like Irish, but like that, it's a small island. I'm not going to be able to run.
You have to be selling a lot.
A lot of selling it to everyone's granny. But so it's a big part of it is America.
Right. And I was actually just wondering, is there within Ireland or nearby, is there big conventions where you can be demonstrating this or that?
Yeah, you could spend your life going to conventions, really. There's so I'm going to AdventureCon in a few weeks, which is in Athlone, which is just 2 days of playing games. So I'll be running the game there on Saturday and Sunday evening, which is really good. GaelCon back in October is kind of one of the bigger ones. And then within Ireland, there's Itzicon, WarpCon, Dominicon. There's loads of ones, usually done through the colleges and things like that. And then you have like Dublin Comic Con and all the like GamerCon or GamerFest, whatever it's called. But then there's UK Games Expo in the UK in Birmingham in May. So I'll be going to that one. That's a massive one. But I'm just going, like any of the conventions I go to this year, it's mostly as a guest, just to go and have a look around and meet people.
You're not demonstrating the game or anything beyond the woods?
I'd be demonstrating, but I won't have like a booth or anything like that because I won't have any stock. And then the Origins in the US is a big one, and then Gen Con is the big one in August in the US. So I'll be going over to that, but just as a guest to kind of wander around and have a look and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you could literally spend your whole year just going to conventions because there's so many of them.
Do you?
I'd love to, but it's all very expensive.
I'm going to ask you a beginner or a noob question on my part, just because I honestly don't know the answer, and while you're sitting across from me. How does a quest or a game of whether it's D&D or that come to a conclusion? Like what event occurs that you win it or it ends or you lose or something?
Yeah, I mean...
Or is that the age-old question?
They can and they can't, So there's like adventures and campaigns. So an adventure might be you play an adventure, go into the dungeon and get this piece of treasure and come back. And that's an adventure. But the campaign could last for years and it'd be a load of adventures stitched together. And it might never end. Some people play literally forever. Whereas like usually what happens is people play for a few months or a few years and then the game kind of falls apart and then you start again with a new group or whatever. But like at the very basic level, it's bring the ring to Mordor. And once you do that, you're done. And you can end the story there. And the GM, I've done it myself, where like you'll finish a campaign and you kind of do a bit of a like an epilogue, and you show where people are a few years later and they've settled down and that kind of thing. And then you just start a new campaign, maybe in the same world, maybe in a different world, or you play a different type of game or whatever. But it is like at its surface, it's stuff like get the ring to Mordor, and each of your adventures is like, well, first part of the adventure is get to Rivendell, and then like that kind of thing. So.
Yeah. All right, because I never. You can see how much I'm exposing myself as a noob in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's all
slightly
good.
a phony in the gaming world.
It's similar to your computer RPGs.
Yeah.
So you'll have your overarching thing in, was it Fallout? I can't remember what it is in Skyrim, but in Fallout it's like find your dad, but then you have all these quests in between.
What's a really dumb question that somebody asked you? What's the one where you're like, oh come on, why are you asking me that for? But you have to begin about you're just kind of playing nice and like this.
Yeah, there's no real dumb questions. Just people just don't know what they don't know. It's I think for me it's most people are like, oh, so video games. No, it's literally you sit at a table. It's like, oh, board games.
No.
It's a book. You figure out the rules. Like
that's why I made sure to outline that in the beginning, because that is absolutely the big. Yeah, that's absolutely the big one. If you've never seen it and you don't know what it is, you'll be confused until it's explained or you see it.
Yeah. And like you can play with miniatures, you can play without miniatures, that kind of thing. Some people do. Like if you watch Stranger Things, the boys are in their basement playing and they'll have like little figures and miniatures, and you can play it like that or you can not. But yeah. There's no stupid questions. It's just
what they say is, or what I say is, the only stupid question is the question you don't ask.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I look at it.
But that's like I think that's the fear people don't play these games is either they would feel embarrassed playing them and pretending to be a character, or it's the fear of seeming like they don't know what they're doing. And the more I've played the games, the more comfortable I've gotten either running the games or doing silly voices and things like that. Like, but some people don't. Like some people talk in character. Like I walk up to the guard and I say hello, hail there, kind of thing. Or people like I walk up to the guard and I say hi, and then I try to get into the building, kind of thing. That people don't want to talk in character. And then you like one of the guys in my group, he does amazing accents. He's like always great. And then I'm not, so it's quite fun trying to find the voice if you want to do it. Like, but yeah, and it's depends on what you're in the mood for. Different types of games. You can play a fantasy game like Beyond the Woods, or like Lord of the Rings, or you can play one that like is like Buffy or Supernatural or whatever. Doctor Who, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So and they're very different feel to them. It's just find the one that you like, and a lot of them they'll have things like starter sets, which are literally you pick them up and it tells you how to play. And there's actually a big thing these days is now solo games. So you play them by yourself, or they have a solo mode, and they're a bit like the choose your own adventure books.
They're
kind of like that, and you might have a dice.
Those are terrific. Some of those are terrific. Do you know anything about? Does there any LARPing go on in Ireland that you're aware of?
I think there is. I've never been into LARP, but even like at the conventions that you go to, there'll be like LARP games going on. I think there was some going on at GaelCon. I don't know if there's any at AdventureCon, but yeah, LARPing is a big thing. I've never actually done LARPing, so live action role playing. But I know there is like a lot of times there'll also be rules. Like some of it it's just you talk, and it's a bit like kind of that murder mystery dinner party where you literally just go around and talk. But someone will be like, they'll be in the woods and they'll be throwing like little balls at each other, and it's like fireball kind of thing. Like, but I don't know. I've never actually. Apparently, they have their own rules and stuff. So yeah, it is definitely there is a community in Ireland, and I apologize if I've insulted anyone there. But it's not one that I actually know much about.
I don't think you insulted anyone. I don't think there's anything.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'm not even sure if I'm including this because it's a little off topic, but I genuinely am curious of seeing some LARPing go on. So I know I've heard in Czech Republic can be a very big thing or something like that. Or it's a lot bigger.
I know up the. I have a friend who she was in Sweden, and they used to basically go into the woods and they'd have like armor on and everything like that, and like fake elf ears and stuff, and they'd LARP out in the woods, and it looked like something out of Lord of the Rings, like. So, yeah.
Class. Well, look, Emmet. I don't have that many other. I mean, I could go through stuff like I do somewhat questions. Like if someone's choosing a character and beyond, when you're character creation in Beyond the Woods, let's say I want to call my character. You name your character, I presume, right? Let's say I want to call him, Heentalk or something like that. Could I do that, or is there rules naming systems?
Do whatever you want.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah. Well, generally,
could you call him Pegasus Buchanan?
Yeah. See, so I say do whatever you want, but usually there's kind of I can't remember the name of it, but it's kind of like an agreement when you sit down at the table that you'll kind of play to the. It's almost like a contract, I suppose, that you like play in world almost, and you won't do something that'll rip people out of the world. Like, because I've played games with people before, and it was, let's say, like a horror game. Mm-hmm. But if you're playing a horror game, you have to be in the mind frame to play a horror game and be scared and all that kind of stuff. And there's a bit of buy-in. Yeah. Whereas if you have someone that's playing and they're kind of like joking and everything, it kind of ruins it for everyone else. So you'll just be like, hey, I don't think it's for you. Do you mind not playing this one? And yeah, sometimes, yeah. Really? Especially like I've played with my group for years, Yeah. And they were like, yeah, Grant, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And then like, then you'll be like, okay, we're all making like relatively serious characters. It's going to be a serious campaign. And you'd be like, oh, I'm Billy Bong the halfling, and I have bright pink hair, and I have like a clown nose and stilts and all that kind of thing. You're like, you're slightly not fitting the tone of the game that we're going for. So usually like, it's called a session 0. You sit down with people and go, hey, here's the tone of the game. Here's the kind of characters you're making. Maybe don't play this character in this game. And you get that buy-in from people that they've all kind of agreed, okay, this is how we're going to play the game, this is the type of game we're going for. And that's the best way to do things.
Its form is that that would be poor form in a tabletop to be just like
kind of.
But is there any other?
No, but like you'll have like tabletop games almost always degenerate into like comedy.
Yeah,
like if you. So I keep mentioning Lord of the Rings, but a much more accurate representation of an actual D&D game is if you go and watch the Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves. Is that it with Chris Pine?
Oh, the recent one. I haven't. I must look at it.
It feels a bit like Guardians.
I've seen the WoW movie.
Yeah, it feels a bit like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah,
but like that's a much more accurate representation of what a D&D group is like, because they're laughing and joking and kind of being stupid and making fools of themselves and making all the wrong decisions.
Yeah, that's
more what it's like. It's not like Lord of the Rings, really. Like it's the other side, because you're sitting around with your mates and inevitably something silly and goofy happens. And like when I was playing the game before, and it was one of those things where I had read a word and I'd never actually heard the word said. So we're talking about like, when you go into like a dungeon, say, and it was like there's this flaming bowl of coals burning, and the word is brazier, so a burning brazier. But I said brazier, which is a bra. And the game was basically over from then, because everyone just started laughing and we couldn't get it back on track. So we were just like laughing and giggling for about an hour because of one poor misspoken word by me. But stuff like that happens all the time, and it's loads of fun.
And you've had to relearn a bunch of Irish for Beyond the Woods as well.
Yes, I have. Yeah. Well, relearn. I was never great at it anyway. But
will there be an Irish language edition of it?
I was toying with it, but it's just like, I'd love to do it, but for the print run size you couldn't. One of the big things that I have in it, and that some people have already said thank you for, is there's a pronunciation guide in the back.
Brilliant!
Brilliant!
You could have done with that Brazier incident.
Exactly.
Well, no, that was probably just a normal English word that they assumed you should have known anyway.
It's just me being a dope. but yeah, there's a pronunciation guide for Irish people, but also like for Americans and things like that. But so that was really handy. We went through that with Marie, my wife. And she helped me.
So Irish place names come into a huge amount.
It's more, so there's some of it, but there's also words that, because I've taken some words and kind of smushed them together so they sound like more fantasy. So it's like Tirnasketh, Tirnaskaha. So I've kind of mushed that together. So I've done that in a couple of places, like Quilchamar is spelled very differently, but it's Quilcha Marv. So dead wood. Yeah. So we've done that in a few places. So any Irish people out there, like, it's on purpose. I'm not trying to purposely bastardize it, but like, I'm just looking at the map here because I put down one of the forests is Donach Day, which is
Sunday,
but it's Donadee, because myself and my family, we go to Donadee Forest.
Donadee.
But it's anglicised. So
near. Where's Donadee? Is it near Enfield?
I can't remember. I always drive up past Port Arlington and that way.
Donadee.
But Donadee, it's lovely.
Yeah.
But it's obviously anglicised, so the actual name was at Downach Day. It's down in the bottom left. You can see on the map. But I put that in because it's a nice nod to my family, because we always take the dogs and the kids for a walk out there. So, but yeah,
Lochmore, Big Lake, Loch Yog, Little Lake.
Some of
Black Lake, Loch Dove.
Yeah. So,
Barbon Mountains.
yeah, White Top. White Top. Yeah.
Okay,
So stuff like that, yeah.
I can't believe I was going to actually, I was actually going to like see about wrapping up the podcast, and I haven't even looked at the map yet. That kind of thing. I did come in slightly.
It's only a tiny bit of the map. I have the big map is being printed, and actually it should arrive tomorrow, unfortunately, which is bad timing, obviously. But yeah.
But sure, look, have you done much else in the publicity cycle for this yet, or like specifically for this?
I've kind of been doing ads, meta ads, since about October. Contacting various different people, and then Tabletop Gaming magazine, which I thought I had it here. We're on the cover of that as well.
Oh, brilliant!
Which is a magazine in the UK, an actual print publication. So that's in the UK, and it comes out to Ireland, and I think there's some of it in the States, or people going to order it. And then I'm hopefully doing something with Polygon. You might know they're the big video game news website. So I'm hopefully doing stuff with them as well. And then
interviews, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And there's a couple of Irish actual play or people who like they podcast the games they play and stuff. So I might be doing some stuff with them as well. So that'll be fun. Yeah, kind of running games for people and things like that, and then running games at the conventions, and then just walking around handing people your business card and be like, hey, scan the QR code, please follow the campaign.
Oh yeah. Sometimes I wonder about business cards. I still need those, but a QR code would be very useful.
Yeah, it just links out to a link tree, so it's handy. So.
Handy as hell. Yeah. Well, no, I don't have any more questions prepared there. Anyways, Emmet, you got you know, if you got anything else you want to say, or if you want to plug yourself, you want to plug the game, socials,
just
what's
game.
Going down.
If it sounds good, find me on various social medias and follow Beyond the Woods on Kickstarter. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. There's a Discord channel where people can pop in and chat about the game, everything like that. So yeah, we're everywhere.
Yeah,
everywhere to some degree. Blue Sky, Twitter, all that stuff.
All right, well, groovy. No, it's been good to meet you, and by all means, probably going to pick your brain on more things that are slightly irrelevant after the podcast ends. But thanks for being part of the podcast, Emmet, very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the Weird Ireland stuff and the book and the TikToks and everything. It's great fodder for Beyond the Woods.
Well, look, hopefully sometime when the game comes out, people are going to be picking Brinsley McNamara as their character name and their character build.
It's a good name. I should put you in, actually. Yeah, that'd be good.
Fire me in there somewhere. 100%. All right, well, thanks, Emmet, for being part of this interview. I want to thank the listener. I want to thank you for listening. Thanks for listening, and see you somewhere else in the Weird Ireland podcast.